Zainal Abidin Sanusi. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start in a short while. Can you please take your seats? Shall we start? Assalamualaikum and a very good morning and good afternoon, good evening to everyone here today and via virtual all over the world on the other side of the earth, and to the honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. With us here today is Dr. Neil Kaur from UN Habitat. Yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Sri Dr. Muhammad Uzair Mahidin, the Chief Statistician from Department of Statistics Malaysia. Mr. Ahmad Fahmi Muhammad Fazil, Member of Parliament. Ms. Marina Cik Mokhtar, Deals Director, Economic and Policy, PwC Malaysia. Dr. Muhammad Afzal Nizam Abdul Rashid, the Chief Economist from Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad. Professor Dr. Pang Siu Nui, College of Law, Government and International Studies, University Utara Malaysia. Welcome to the Higher Level Dialogue 2, with our topic today, Leadership and Governance in Implementing the SDGs to Achieve Inclusive Urbanisation. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Marina Cik Mokhtar from PwC Malaysia to take this session. Please be invited.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and thank you once again for inviting me to this Malaysia Urban Forum. Congratulations on putting this together in such a new normal. I'm sure it's not easy and it's a nightmare to manage both live sessions and virtual sessions. I'm also very proud to be in the extreme row of panelists here that we have. So it'll be much unique. There's a lot to learn from all of them with different various backgrounds. Some are practitioners, some are within the government sector, some in the knowledge institutions, as well as within the government itself, and of course the financing sector. I think our lovely MC have actually introduced some of our panelists. So maybe just a bit of background about myself. My name is Marina Mokhtar. I'll be the moderator for today's dialogue. It's on leadership and governance in implementing the SDGs to achieve inclusive urbanization. It's very long, a bit of a mouthful, but essentially what it means is basically talking about how do we work together and lead the way and govern and implementing what the global goals are talking about in achieving inclusivity. You know, I think this morning we had a very inspiring session about how do we eradicate poverty amongst not just the rural areas but also the urban areas. And I think it's a very interesting time that we live in now, that, you know, with the pandemic that is around us, you know, it's threatening cities and communities. Cities are on the front line. You know, we are the ones, who needs to actually work together and, you know, manage. You know, there are a lot of things that are coming out, not just health issues, there are social issues. People are losing their jobs, there are more new poors, more than what we can imagine. And people are also working in informal sectors. We spoke about residents of informal settlements who are particularly vulnerable. They are more exposed to this pandemic, and of, you know, physical distancing is socially impossible. I think just now the lady from Dignity for Children is saying 6 people in one tiny apartment. What is social distancing about then? How can we? 6 families, oh my God, 6 families in a tiny apartment. So what is our role as leaders? I think all of us are leaders in our own ways, and we are influencers. So we cannot choose to wait and see anymore. I think, you know, the older generations, we sort of see, we need to actually be more reactive. And, we cannot be more reactive, we need to be more proactive to manage these environmental and strains on people and the planet. So it's not an easy task. You know, it's talking about bringing everyone together, but, you know, leadership and management has always been essential for organizations in all sectors. And, you know, not just to find a good strategic plan and action framework, but actually to operationalize these activities. And we talk about how we leverage upon NGOs to empower the community as well. I think, just as an example, even PwC globally is making a commitment to achieve net zero carbon by 2030. You know, we are working together with our clients and all that. So that's enough about, you know, setting the context. Maybe I would like now to invite our first speaker, Dr. Uze, to actually share your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina, and all my fellow panelists. I would like to give a brief presentation so we can see where we are in terms of the assessment on SDG, and perhaps this also can put a context for our discussion. So these are some of the points I would like to highlight. We have about 8. And in terms of the SDG government, as shown on the slide, so our commitment started on September 2015, and the role of Department of Statistics is as the focal point in the coordination of SDG indicator. So we already have the National Steering Committee chaired by DG of EPU, and we identify 5 clusters on inclusivity, well-being, human capital, on environment and natural resources, as well as economy growth. And in terms of our activity with regard to the SDG, as shown on the slide, the initial assessment had been done in 2018, and from this assessment it showed that about 48% indicators are available, 23% partially available, 15% partially available but need further development, 9% not available, and 5% considered not relevant, but it's not definitive. We still can discuss, because when we inform the people that related to this area, they also concerned about when we consider that it's not relevant. And this the SDG progress on the monitoring system. So we already have the dashboard with the support of the United Nations country team, and at the moment the dashboard consists of 81 statistical indicators. And these are the some of the publication. The first published SDG indicator released for 2018 highlight 99 available indicator for the period 2018 until 2018. And currently we are in the midst of preparing the SDG indicator Malaysia for 2019, and we plan to release it in November 2020, and this publication will present 122 available indicator, so with the additional 27 new indicators. To date, there are 49.4 available indicator out of 247 indicators. And goal 3, I highlight to about a good health and well-being, recorded the highest achievement so far for the available indicator, by followed by goal 8, decent work and economic growth, and also goal number 1 is on non-poverty. We have problem little bit on the goal on the life on goal 15, life on land, goal 10, reduce inequality, and goal 9, industry innovation and infrastructure. These are 3 key areas that in terms of the ability of the indicator, the data still limited. There are 27 new available indicator that will be released for 2019. And we also have 36 indicators to be developed, is show in the on the slide. And in terms of census 2020, so I would like to appeal to the public that the census 2020 is also very important for us to monitor our progress with regard to the SDG. Jadi, so our census 2020 is we consider as the very great opportunity for the as the SDG benchmark. So in the parameter SDG, 5 area on the people, peace, prosperity, and also on the planet. And the coverage for well-being are healthcare, housing, lifestyle, crime prevention, road safety, develop social unity, and also active lifestyle. And on the general health, cover nutrition, physical activity, and active lifestyle. Smart cities cover municipality, housing, access to public transport, public facility, and also on the internet. Also related to safe cities, cover on community safety, digital health infrastructure, and on environment, cover including the supply of the utilities, and also included the 3R about the embracing the recycle, reduce, and reuse. This among the question that maybe perhaps some of us has done, then can really can see how this census after we concluded at the end of the October is will be provide a very rich information for us to look at the what we call stock taking, what happening on the ground, and how we can strengthen the area that need to be strengthened. And if we really have the very strong, or we have the strength, how we can further strengthen the what area we have the strength. This is something that I would like to convey, that the responsibility of us to look at the census 2020 is very much very important for all of us. And in terms of the challenges, the issue on the measurement, monitoring the SDG progress is among others is on the standardization, because a lot of the information or indicator is not reside in the Department of Statistics Malaysia. Is also some is in the ministry agencies. So we need to do the harmonization, and also some of indicator is involve various agencies for a single indicator. And what more, some of the indicator are in the form of unstructured. So it is something that we are working on it to harmonize the various data sources or data provider. Way forward, we will continue to do the engagement. We really invite everyone who would like to engage with us in various platform. So we are very open about it. Marina, thank you very much. That's all my brief presentation on the progress of the assessment on the Malaysia SDG. And I add on, we really looking forward after the census 2020, we're going to have the very granular statistic. We want to have the small area statistic. So we want, for example, YB, for every member of parliament, they have to know what happened in the area under their constitution for the adun and also for the district. So we can actually, with the good statistic, the authority can be see the performance compared to the others. So the statistic is very powerful as the report card. The statistic we spoken. So we really want to see that one day we can take statistic as the second language for the country. The statistic will tell what happened in the past, what happened now, how we can do better in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zee. I mean, congratulations in trying to use our Census 2020 as a key tool to actually help us understand where we are in terms of SDG indicators and moving forward. I think even the World Economic Forum highlighted that data is one of the key barriers, and the interoperability of some of the data quality and the volume of it. I think you mentioned, how do we standardize the data and harmonize the data. So thank you, Dato'. I wish you all the best in we're getting better decisions in understanding how we work. And okay, next, if you, I will. Yes. Sorry, thanks, Dr. Zee. He has to take his leave. Okay, now I would like to invite Dr. Neil Kaur to actually give a few words in terms of Dr. Neil, if you are able to give a presentation or a sharing. So just to give some some remarks.
Thank you very much. I'm assuming you are asking me to assume.
Sorry, just to give some some opening remarks
from Datuk Sri
Yes, Datuk Sri Maimuna.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, because I was under the impression I was the discussant. So, thank you very much for this, Marina, for the chairing this session, and I'll try my best to convey a few key messages from the Executive Director. Firstly, apologies, the Executive Director has been called away to Putrajaya, so she's not able to be with us this morning. And let me just introduce myself. I'm Neil Kaur, her Special Advisor and the Officer in charge of her office in Nairobi, Kenya. So previously I was with an outfit called Think City, and I think I met YB at that time. YB, good to see you again. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think three key messages with regards to this very important topic on leadership and governance. I think that Datuk Sri Uzia has already given us the baseline for an evidence-based decision-making process. I think every leader needs to be equipped with the right kind of data and to be able to make objective decisions. And I can only hope that in the case of Malaysia, so I now have to wear the UN hat, and every country that we go to, we say the same thing. Let's make sure that we adopt evidence-based process that is transparent, that allows for responsible decision-making and informed decision-making. So that's really something that I think Datuk Sri Maimuna would like me to convey. Secondly, with regards to the SDGs and the acceleration of the SDGs, I think Malaysia is doing very well in the larger sense of comparing it with other developing countries. But of course, there are always ways to improve. And again, wearing the UN flag, I think we would like to advocate for a rights-based approach when we are implementing the SDGs. So with regards to housing, definitely, I think Malaysia is again, moving in the right direction in the provision of housing and shelter as a basic human right. So I think that is something that we would definitely like for our leaders and our people's representatives to consider. And then finally, I think that again, with regards to governance, apart from the legal dimensions, Datuk Sri would definitely like to convey to everyone to take what she calls a 4P approach, which is public, private, people partnership. I think in all decision making, we need to embrace that dimension. And as an international gender champion, my boss would definitely would like me to say that let's also embrace gender. Let's also look at when she was she was a mayor in Penang, she had done gender-based budgeting, and I think that putting women at the center of decision making is very important, because we need everyone, a whole of house approach, a whole of community approach, to be successful in achieving the SDGs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for passing through the message of Datuk Sri Maimunah, and that definitely actually sets the tone of what our conversation will be today on leadership and governance. Maybe next, I would like to invite Dr. Pang, if you want to have a sharing, as the only other female gender on the panelists.
Yeah, that's right. I was just looking around and said, oh goodness, I'm the only, what they call lady party here. Anyway, good morning to my fellow participants. Thank you very much, Urbanice, for inviting me to this session. Okay, I am from the University of Utara, Malaysia, a rural-based university, so very much concerned with I mean, just now I did hear something about urban poverty and so on, but where I come from, we're also very, very concerned about rural poverty. And having lived amongst the people in the rural area and knowing their livelihood, I can also share with you all, if need be later, the rural poverty aspect in the rural areas. But anyway, today I just want to share with you all some of the current events that are happening and my observation as to where we are going in terms of SDGs. We know that the world is currently amidst a technical transformation, and this will change the way in which we work and in which the way we live, okay? And this is in the advent of Industry 4.0. And we know that this Industry 4.0 will impact on Malaysia's commitment to the SDGs. And this is a clarion call then for Malaysia to shift to a higher value added process. We are now talking about things like digitization, advanced manufacturing, advanced technologies, and efficient resource utilization. It is therefore very difficult to predict precisely how this transformation will affect and impact industries, and in its process, the urbanization development. And at the end of it, the way that we in a community live, whether in the rural areas or even in the urban areas. But it is a foregone conclusion that this is part of our development, and this transformation will usher in growth and change. This is especially so for the industries where operation processes will be transformed. Why am I speaking so much on industrialization and so on? Because as we realize, this is the fourth phase of the industrialization growth that we are looking at. Having gone through, if you look into Alvin Toffler's books on the third wave, what do you call it, power shift and so on. And today we are into this fourth IR. So we find that we will, the process will have transformed, and so will the energy footprint of manufacturing, of industries and factories. we need to look into the, or what do you call it, the energy footprint of the industrialization process, and then its impact on the surrounding communities. In this case, I am alluding to the leadership in industries, and this is where I'm going to talk about the leadership and governance here. And I'm looking in both the leadership in governance as well as leadership in the industries here. But here, the leadership of industries, that development of sophisticated industrial processes, and this modernization theory, if we look at it carefully, it leads to the evolution of complex urban communities and very large urban agglomeration. And this is where we are talking about things like urbanization, urban poverty, and so on. And in instances when these cities, towns, and urban areas are poorly managed, okay, then it begins to generate inequalities and problems, which communities and governments then need to resolve through social policies. This morning, I think we have heard about what you call urban poverty in the cities, and the means of which many of these NGOs have played a very crucial part, okay, in trying to alleviate or at least to meet the needs of the urban poor. But this is something which is with us today, and we need to confront them because of this theory of modernization. And so the government has to come in with these social policies, and such social policies need to embrace sustainable actions that will mitigate the fear of poverty, the fear of inequality, environmental degradation, climate change, etc. All these things that will come in the midst of the 4IR and the urbanization process. So with further industrialization and urbanization, social mobility is inevitable, and more specialized structures arise once more to cope with the growing volume of demands from community, from businesses and industries. So this is a revolving or evolving process whereby with this modernization theory that we can't escape from, it would require more specialized structures and social mobility. And this is where we go back into the past when we talk about things like the urban pull and the rural push. These are the factors, okay, that affect what is happening in the cities that we are living in today. So the modernization theory, therefore, reflects the need for the involvement of political and administrative systems of the nation. Because here we heard again about the need of the NGOs and how many of these, societies being helped to overcome the community needs and so on. But the time has come whereby, although the industries, if you look into the industrialization process and so on, and increasing of living standards and so on, there is also a need for what we call it as state intervention. There is a need for the involvement of the political and administrative systems of every nation that has to come in to what we call it balance, or to at least not only provide the needs of the communities, but what we call them as provision of public goods, which we cannot depend upon many of the industries to provide. So you find that there is the shift of attention to the development of the state and its leadership in unifying and protecting the sustainable development of the population and the community, and at the end of the day, the sustainable development of the cities. Now, this will be in line with the SDGs to provide a roadmap for more balanced and equitable urban development. Now, at the same time, if you talk in terms of the industries, you have SDG 9, which allows and provides for the industries to promote sustainable industrialization and sustain increases in living standards. But while SDG 12 ensures sustainable consumption and production patterns that will reduce economic, environmental, and social costs. So this is the side of the industries, and this is side of the industrialization process, but and how these industries try to meet the needs of the community in which their activities are being run. Okay, so, but like I said, there is a need for state intervention at some juncture, and the SDG provides an opportunity for the governments at the local level to work together in partnership with the industries and the communities. Here we are looking into the involvement of at least the third tier of government, if not even the second tier of government, especially in Malaysia's case, where we talk about the involvement of local government in enhancing the needs of its communities, especially in what one of our speakers did talk about, participation or participatory process. Okay, so here the SDG, if I can refer to the SDG 16 and SDG 17, which allows government to get themselves involved. The SDG 16 talks about peace, justice, and strong institutions. So this is where local government, in the hope of developing a more participatory process, would be able to come up with strong institutions that promote local involvement. And I know that somebody mentioned about Local Agenda 21 that has already been in place for many, many years, for decades, I would say. Okay, then of course you have the SDG 17. The SDG 17 here allows also the public sector to play its role in terms of governance, that is to provide the partnership and influence in policy outcomes. So hopefully the part of the leadership and governance here would enable the government and the nation to work together in partnership with the industries, where they will meet the SDG 9 and SDG goals to lead the nation to higher growth. Okay, but we know that this SDG came about before the COVID pandemic that we are facing today. So we have to acknowledge the existence of the virus and our need to relook at its impact on leadership and governance. When the SDG came up, there was no such thing as the pandemic, there was no such thing as this virus. In fact, if want to be a little bit more conflicting and more extreme, we can say that perhaps having experienced the COVID-19, this pandemic, the virus is actually a friend to the environment. It is a friend to us, because for the first time in the history of the Earth, I think the Earth balancing, this year, I think we were late. We are late in, if I can show it to you later. We are very late in terms of meeting the, the Earth footprint, okay? Okay, okay, coming back to the COVID here, so that is an extreme example, that's an extreme view and so on. Because for the first time, I think in many of the cities, so we will have to usher in this new growth and change, and perhaps like what they call it, the new normal. How are we going to challenge ourselves to living together with this pandemic? But this is also especially for the industries where operation processes will have to be transformed. And so I am thinking that in terms of the leadership in industries, okay, that the leadership of industries, development of sophisticated industrial processes, and so on, may have to be relooked and energized within this line of the new normal. Okay, so the questions that arise for our leadership here and for governance is how do we balance between the health and economy? How do we balance between the rich and the poor? What is the carrying capacity of the planet? And what is the new normal in operations today? Okay, and I'd like to conclude with this statement from the Global Footprint Network. It talks about leadership. It says that leadership is also understanding the breadth and depth of the issues concerned, which is that the impact of everything we do, including implementation of SDGs, must be within the carrying capacity of our one planet, taking into account impact on global warming and biodiversity loss. And that decisions shape the future, and we hope that we can make those decisions one planet compatible. So I'd just like to end there, and perhaps during the discussion, I'll bring up some more elements. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pang.
Okay.
I think that leads us very nicely to maybe YB to share your thoughts, in terms of the social policies that Dr. Pang mentioned just now.
Hello. Okay. Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Good morning. Thanks for having me. I think last year I did join an Urbanice program. This year, thanks for inviting me. There are a couple of things that kind of sparked my train of thought, got my synaptic gaps closed in a bit more when Dr. Uze, as well as some of the other panelists before this, their presentation. I think there is this gap between. I think a lot of Malaysians have no idea what SDGs are. You talk about sustainability. What is sustainability in Bahasa Melayu, for example? What is it in Tamil? What is it in Bahasa Kadazan Dusun Murut? What is it in Iban? What is it in? Yeah, and this is a practical problem. At international fora that I participate in, one of the biggest problems that we face is actually vernacularization of these ideas. Otherwise, it is limited to an English-speaking elite, and the language is elite, and therein lies an inherent systemic problem when we talk about sustainability. Otherwise, it is something which only academics, certain bureaucrats are able to tap into and discuss. So the challenge for us, and challenge for myself particularly, is how is it that I can make issue of sustainability, kemampanan, kelestarian, relevant, resonant with orang Kampung Kerinci, for example. Yeah? People who are staying in PPR Kampung Kerinci. Yeah? Because it's well and good for us to see the figures, 50% achievable, yeah? But the reality on the ground is very different, which is why as a parliamentarian, my long-standing engagement with whether it's EPU, particularly the team that handles poverty, is yes, we see numbers, but I see faces on the ground. Yeah, and you can say, oh yeah, we have a 5% unemployment rate, but I see the families where the mother just lost a job over MCO. Yeah? And we have these realities to bridge between what is presented and what is actually felt on the ground. So I think the term is vernacularization, ataupun how do we interpret and bring this down. The danger is that it remains in bureaucrat speak, it remains in legislative or legal speak, but it's not in rakyat speak. So how is it that we can bring this conversation and make it everyday language? Yeah, because then you have people asking, do I need to put in an air conditioner unit in my PPR? Why is it? We talk about urban poverty, but we don't really talk about the architecture of poverty. Just now, as I came in, there was a discussion briefly about the construction of vertical slums. It's not their choice. It's because of policymakers. It's because of, at that point in time, the thinking was we should build up. And unfortunately, at that point in time, a lot of it favored developers. So now we have to change that. So that's why, at least for me, dekat Lembah Pantai, one of my I say, yes, you can build Bangsa South, that's your choice. But Kampung Kerinci is there to stay. So yeah, we have now a Silicon Kerinci in Kampung Kerinci because of places like Bangsa South. So this question of vernacularizing, making it sensible, making it understandable to a wider audience. Oh, careful, terjatuh. Yeah. I think this is very important, and at the base of it, at the heart of it, is about civic education. It's the same thing when people think about democracy. People think that once you cast your vote, that's it. Tamat democracy, right? I've done my part. Actually, no. Democracy is something that is to be lived every day and practiced every day. So participatory democracy is something which is relatively radical and necessary in order for us to have a proper feedback loop between data-driven and evidence-based policy making and implementation, and what actually people who are on the receiving end, how is it that they are actually getting this, yeah? And how is it that it's going right or going wrong? So civic education it plays a very important part. So as a political leader, as a people's representative, wakil rakyat, one of the ways that I do it, and I know many of my colleagues, at least in Kuala Lumpur, do it as well, is we have a lot of engagement sessions with communities, and not only to hear the problems, but to look at sustainable community development, meaning a lot of times there's a lot of distrust in communities. So by just bringing people to the table to talk, you can help to bridge that gap, and this is important. This is something which I think is not happening enough and should be part of the discussion on sustainability, because otherwise we see that, okay, we tick all the boxes and that's done. Tak boleh. It has to be more than that. And for me, I share actually, in fact, I was just, before we were going up, I mentioned to Dr. Uze, you know, my particular interest as a chemical engineer, I'm trained as a chemical engineer, is data. One of the biggest frustrations that we have as members of parliament is the lack of granular data, so that we know, yes, you have a national average, you have you know the breakdown of B40, but to me, it's difficult when you say, you know, Lembah Pantai is a polyglot. You've got T20, you've got M40, you've got B40, and in one area people talk about the Bangsa bubble, but actually in Bangsa you've got both Wan Menerong, which is the top, you know, really T20, but you've got Seri Pahang, which is B40. So that's in Bangsa as well. So you know, you can't lump everybody into a so-called Bangsa bubble. So what I mean is that there has to be a valiant effort, there has to be concerted effort, more put in, not only to gather data, to interpret data and to share data. A big problem with a lot of government agencies is that many different agencies, dia pegang data tu, dia tak nak share dengan orang lain. They don't want to share with others. Yeah? So you have duplication of data, which I think Dr. Uze was alluding to. And it's very frustrating for us who are policymakers, who are legislators, because otherwise you step into Dewan Rakyat with anecdotes, with bits and pieces of information. So a lot of data is already there. Actually, a lot of data can be more, I think, granular, but we have to know also where to look and how to piece these dots together so that we can see the clearer picture. And there's a question I think I have about when it comes to sustainability and leadership, is whether it's academia, whether it's politics, whether it's business, is leadership sustainable? Yeah. You can have, for example, any particular organization, you can have a leader who can bring a new style, but how sustainable is that style? Otherwise it becomes too iconocentric, it becomes too cult, you know, it becomes too personality driven. Whereas what you need is something which is more mass based. How do you filter and bring down this so that the reforms become longer lasting and further reaching rather than limited to the presence of personality or two? So the question of sustainability in leadership and governance is very clear. I'm not even talking about political sustainability, which we all know right now how it is, but it's about leadership. Yeah? And I don't know whether I have any answer for that. Right now, I don't think there is. The hope is in the next generation of young people who hopefully, because of a difference in consumption, consumer behavior, also social behavior, perhaps they can provide us with a new template for more sustainable leadership going forward. But at least I know in my circle, my cohort of members of parliament, I think it's something that we're struggling with. and for me, ultimately, you know, it's about making sure that all of this gets translated from paper to what's really happening on the ground. Yes, we can aim for, you know, the mark of sustainable nation by 2030 katalah, but how is it that practices in DBKL or practices in MBPJ, MBSA, a number of these kind of local governments, which is where government is seen most, by the way, how has that changed? How has that filtered down? And not just at the mayor level, all the way down to Pengok Kuasa, to the people on the ground. Do they understand what it is, you know, when it's about sustainability? Lastly, just a minor, perhaps, you know, maybe a flippant comment, but we are here in the tropics, right? And yet here I am, pakai blazer in a cold room, and some of the camera people are dressed up like memang sejuk. So there's a question of how is it that even we are approaching sustainability? And is this temperature? And this is something which I raised in Parliament multiple times. It's too cold, you know, in Parliament. It's a matter of thinking about this lah, because it's a bit too much energy use. So it may seem like rambling. I hope some of the points I shared is of interest. The most important part is the question of vernacularization of the topic of sustainability and the question of sustainable leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, YB. I think actually you touch upon the 5 qualities of the SDG leadership that they were talking about. You know, we talk about being intentional. I think the leaders always have the intention, and we have the ambition. But can we be consistent? I think that was one of the questions you mentioned. Do we follow through? And we talk about collaboration a lot. Like you mentioned, how can we achieve collaboration if even simple communication is not done, you know, from the top to you know, the people on the ground, people on the streets, you know, even children and elderly, you know, like we're talking about not just gender, we're talking about race, we're talking about age gap, we're talking about generational gap. And of course, finally, is accountability. I think with data, we will be able to have more accountability to understand whether our actions are effective, are impactful, and, you know, hopefully that will also translate, you know, to the realities that we have in whatever that we want to achieve. Thank you, YB. I think that was very good. Next, maybe if I could invite Dr. Nizam for you to share your views.
Okay. Terima kasih, Marina. My name is Nizam. I'm from Bank Islam. My role at Bank Islam is chief economist. So my background has always been on financial economics. So my advice to the bankers is about, you know, how to make money lah. But having said that, I think the underlying factors that, you know, that encapsulate our goal, you know, to achieve that target, so to speak, in terms of profits, is also something that we cannot really discard. You know, the social fabric, and when it comes to urban, who makes up that urbans? You know, it's actually the people. So in that regards, perhaps I can share our own experience at Bank Islam, especially during this pandemic. Of course, we have been hearing the government has been so proactively in terms of, you know, introducing measures to minimize the impact. So when we did our roadshows via webinar, thanks to the technology, I talk about the government policies, the measures that have been announced, like moratorium. So the kind of clients that we have, obviously, because Bank Islam is very heavy on consumers, on retail. And our main clients, mostly government civil servant, teachers, government employees, certain GLCs. When I talk about, you know, things like quite technical, such as overnight policy rate, OPR, you know, when I explain to them, you know, the reason why it is being, you know, implemented in such a way, and how, as a person, you know, can benefit from it, and I was quite surprised. They can actually understand it. So I like to echo what YB said about, I think what you said about one of them is communication. You know, communication from the policymakers to the stakeholders, you know. And then when I I think last 2 weeks I attended a session with Tengku Zafrul. I mean, they invited all the economists to share our thoughts on the budget 2021. Of course, along the way, the discussion, of course, one of the key issues that were raised, obviously, about GST, whether GST will make a comeback. And then there's one person saying that, okay, let's rebrand it to VAT. I responded to that. I think I told the audience that we need to be fair, we need to be truthful what we are trying to plan, what we are trying to do. Because our societies, our Malaysians especially, we are quite civilized. We are very reasonable. So I think if there is a constant engagement, you know, people can actually take it, they can understand it, and therefore they can shape their expectations, you know. So I think these are the key things that we talk about leadership and governance, because leadership is about making choices. And as an economist, among key issues that we try to deal with, obviously, to how to allocate these limited resources. So along the way, there will be difficult choices has to be made, and we need to cascade it down and communicate to the stakeholders effectively. And as an economist also, we have been, I mean now it's about pandemic, right? There is actually, if you notice, there is economic cycles that we see actually. You know, every 10 years there will be one recession. This year is definitely is a recession. The last time we had recession, it was in 2009. Prior to that, it was in 1998. Prior to that, it was in 1985. So the question is, what will be the next shocks? What year that will be, you know, in terms of the potential shocks that will happen? Because when shocks happen, that requires resources. And assuming we can agree that 10 years could be probably the plausible cycle, probably we are looking at 2030, that could be another round of shocks or recession that would require a massive amount of resources. So we need to build up that resources now. And among other things that we need to consider, obviously, the financials. And for instance, key decisions, just now I mentioned about GST, decision like subsidy rationalization, how are we going to do about it, you know? It's very tricky actually, because it benefits all of us, but at the same time, it's very suboptimal, because those who shouldn't be getting subsidies also be getting it. So perhaps there need to be a conscious decision to re-look at it. But these are the difficult choices lah. And if you do that under these current circumstances, I don't know how it's going to be like in terms of the political landscape. But these are it requires strong leadership lah, to see this through, and perhaps, you know, it can benefit the urban folks, because I think among other things that we need to consider, apart from the economic cycles, the decision, and also is the financial literacy. If you notice the moratorium, actually for me, as an economist, as someone who did a PhD in household debt, actually I was quite surprised the measures, you know, moratorium. When I did my thesis, when it comes to literature on household debt and what are the typical antidotes to address household debt, is always restructuring of their financials. But I think the government is taking a little bit more in terms of the antidotes by introducing moratorium. And moratorium is across the board. I mean, it's just not Malaysia, but of course quite globally in terms of the measures being announced, being introduced. So I think financial literacy is also another factors that we need to address, because we cannot afford to have severe shocks at the same time, you know, continue to keep on giving handouts, you know, it's not sustainable. So I think that sustainable bit has to also to encapsulate the financials. So I think I end there. Hopefully can discuss more after this.
Thank you, Dr. Nizam. And I think we've heard from the panelists, and if you don't mind, I'll kick off with some questions and answers, and maybe to Dr. Nizam. I think you opened with the fact that, you know, you help banks to make money, but we also believe that, you know, how can the financial institutions play a bigger role in helping to support some of the SDGs and the global goals that we talk about? Because like you mentioned, it requires resources. So what is your view in terms of the financial sector? What can you do more?
Okay, I think Bank Negara on this front is quite forthcoming. One of the key concepts that have been introduced by the Bank Negara is VBI, Value-Based Intermediaries. It was announced in 2018 and is followed through until now, and we have been given a scorecard to follow through, and as a result, for us, for instance, at Bank Islam, we started to look at renewable energy as our key sectors as to build our financing portfolios lah. But beyond that, I think we also understand about the social finance. We look at Wakaf, for instance. We look at Sadaqah House. These are the initiatives that we've been collaborating with the Islamic State Religious Councils, because the way we see it, if you continue to rely on tax as a means to get your resources, it's unsustainable. There must be an effective means to how to redistribute this wealth, and we see Wakaf and Sadaqah is one of the key means lah. So as a result, we already launched Sadaqah House, and Alhamdulillah, the traction is quite good, and the key projects like hemodialysis for schools and everything is gaining traction. But of course, in terms of contribution, it's still small. So these are the key areas that we, as a banker, especially at Bank Islam, we are trying to be different, but also along the way with support or rather policy support from the government, especially from Bank Negara, to push this agenda through. So this is how we responding to the current environment, and perhaps hopefully can value add to the society.
Thank you. Maybe the next question, I'll guess pass on to YB. I think you mentioned earlier as well about how would you like to balance in terms of what sustainability is about? How can because everybody needs to make a difference. We talk about private sector, but these are men in suits or ladies in suits. So what about the community that you work with? So how do you actually engage them and lead them towards this?
The idea is that if you can have the aunties, uncles in a pasar. Before coming here, I was actually in a pasar program in my constituency. I'm imagining, can these aunties and uncles talk about sustainability? If the language can get to them, that's why the word I use is vernacularization. So arming them with that vocabulary so that they talk about it all the time, then to me that's a big win. There's also an important part which I neglected to say tadi, which is there has to be legislative reforms. Yeah? Laws need to change. And in order, so it has to be both at the ground level, also at state assemblies and parliament. And this is important because we have to have some kind of calibration and to make sure that it's not just, as I said, unfortunately, bureaucrats speak. Yeah? It's not just for directors general, for KSUs, for ministry reports to the UN. It's not that, right? Otherwise, it becomes, to me, less meaningful. And to make it truly meaningful is one, to see these broad, expansive reforms to make sure that we have in place, Otherwise, we will see, how is it manifested? Unsustainability, traffic jams, the Sungai Gong, yeah, that kind of pollution, which to me, there should be not only severe sanctions, but it must be built into shareholders' mentality. It should be built into directors' mentality. The board has to change. Idea about sustainability, I don't think is reaching out to beyond our blue chip companies and all. Yes, PwC, okay, but the company that did that, I want to see one of the penalties is that they must adhere to sustainability changes. They must change their practices. Yeah. So to me, to see the effectiveness, one is boleh tak perkara ni jadi buah mulut, percakapan orang biasa, orang kampung, orang flat, orang kedai kopi, and orang masjid, orang surau, right? At a lot of on the ground kind of thing. At the same time, can we change the mindset, particularly I think when we people in industry, the banking sector may not have as much of a front line, but if banks also start changing and focus on certain areas, then you can also influence people who are asking for support from the financial sector, that they also start changing. We've seen it in for example, palm oil, right? So there's this whole question of RSPO, MSPO, yeah, this sustainability, but that's not enough, right? So how is it that we can expand? And it's not just about green building indices, yeah, it's not just about that. Because the question of sustainability, it's great if you build a green building, but if it means you destroy the local ecology, you destroy the local social fabric, which is a real problem in the city, then how sustainable is that development? We don't see the impact on society in that light. So changing the mindset, boardrooms, shareholders, the surau goers, the pasar pagi, you know, people, wet market goers, I think that's where we have to see a saturation point. Yeah, I'm trying to do my part.
Thank you, YB. I think there's a lot about mindset change, and I think you know, institutions like knowledge institutions like universities, and I think Dr. Pang, you spoke about industrialization, how the effects, you know, there are a lot of bad effects on it, but I think there is also a lot of potential in harnessing some of these technologies to actually change the way we work, you know, try to be greener and cleaner by using these technologies. I mean, how do you actually talk about it in the universities that you are now, and how is it being approached currently, especially in the rural area?
Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, yeah, just now I mentioned about something which I wanted to emphasize on is the Earth overshoot. The Earth overshoot was late this year. This is something which we have to take into consideration. Like I said, for all these years, humanity wanted to bring down pollution, wanted to bring a change. We talk about sustainability and so on. We were never able to achieve it, but the virus was able to achieve it within 3 months. So for the first time in the history of the Earth, there was what we call it an Earth overshoot that was late. So that was something which I thought, you know, I'd just like to bring and to highlight to all of us today. So that was why I said, should we look at the virus as a friend or actually as an enemy here? Okay. The other aspect which I just like to touch on is also in terms of the banks and so on. Yeah, my colleague here has just talked about the spending by the banks and so on to the industries and to the community and so on. But I think the question here, normally when we do our work in the universities and so on, I always tell the students is that it is not how much, I call that, how much money is spent. You know, how much money is being given by the industries to the communities, how much the banks and the industries have donated to the universities and so on. But at the end of the day is, how is the money being spent? I think that is the question that we will have to talk in terms of sustainability. We give the X sum of money, but how sustainable is it in terms of how is it being spent? Is it meeting the targets and the objectives? And then we talk about social welfare. Again, here we have to go one step further. Is it social welfare that we are concerned about, or we should, from now on, talk about social well-being? And that is also related to sustainability. Because if you're just talking about social welfare, I don't think that will be sustainable for the community, because we are just giving out the money. But giving out the money, is it well spent? So that's why I want to also put this forth to the United Nations. You're the representative, right? Yeah. Do we look into that, the sustainability of the money? Okay, so that is something which I like to discuss and hope that I can get some answers from it also. And then when we talk about participation from the public, I think this has been discussed years and years ago. Local Agenda 21, I think if we go back to 1980s when Malaysia was a participant with the Rio Agenda and so on, it came out. 80s, I don't know, some of you were even born then, or you're still in diapers. When we were already talking about implementing Agenda 21 and local Agenda 21 in Malaysia, we came up with champions in the local authorities and so on. And that is talking about participation, participatory participation in the local community. So what has happened to local Agenda 21? So with this also, I'd like to also post this to YB. I know I'm part of the panelists here, but I'd like to post that to our YB here. What's happened to LA 21? Worked so hard. Malaysia worked so hard. So the United Nations even came, the UNDP, to support. So what has happened to that? So where is the sustainability issue in this? I mean, we are going back again, round and round the same thing. And now we're talking about participation. We are talking about the 4 Ps. Is it just now? I couldn't catch the fourth one, you see, and the people and so. But that was done years, eons ago, you see. So this is something which we have to explore again. And then talking about industries and the CSR, corporate social responsibility, I think that's what the banks are always looking at. Is it meeting the goals of sustainability? Is it meeting the targets? Or is it just meeting the targets and the objectives of the banks and the industries? So these are the questions I normally pose to my students. This is what I always tell them to do. So that and we come from the rural areas. Mind you, when I send the students out to the rural areas, I mean, we really go out. And there was one stage, I think last year or 2 years, I followed them and we went to visit, we call it Kampung Miskin. I think it was somewhere near to Wang Klian, dekat I think Changlun, and then between Napo dan sebagainya, dekat yang tu Kampung Miskin. Dan bila kita masuk kat sana, saya boleh nampak yang makcik tu dia duduk dengan anak dia, anak lelaki dia jaga. She is only about 70 plus and so on, but because of a fall, she is not able to work, not able to look after herself. Now, what happened when we went in? She said, "Mari, mai, masuk, mai." So kita masuk juga. Bila masuk tu, no place, it was earth. Can you imagine, this is Malaysia today, 2019, 2018. It was earth, and makcik, I'm sorry if I take some time to share this with you, because we're not only talking about urban, because these people from the rural areas are going to move into your urban areas too. So makcik tinggal kat mana? Tinggal kat sini juga. Ya, dapur kat mana Pak Makcik? Dapur kat sini. The dapur was there and the stove was there and the son was helping her. Said that was where they cooked. Then Makcik, you so tidur kat mana? Tidur sebelah kanan. Anak kat belakang. Kat belakang bukan kat belakang rumah tu, tetapi kat dalam bilik tu juga. Okay? So dapur kat sebelah kiri, tempat tidur sebelah kanan. And do you know where the toilet is? Di tengah-tengah. It was a hole in the ground there, covered with a plank or a cardboard. That was a toilet, and that is what you see in Malaysia. I mean, I am shocked too, but that was what my students brought us, and we saw and said, okay, this is how, what are we going to do? How do we help them, you see? And this is sometimes I feel so sad. This is where sometimes I feel that this is a sector that's always been forgotten. This is a sector that has always been marginalized. This is a sector that we really have to extend our help to them. But she was so happy to see us. She never asked for anything. She never even really complained. You know, she was happy for visitors, us to visit her. And she told us, ada mangga-mangga kat luar, ada buah-buahan, silalah makan. How to eat, how to pluck her fruits. That's her livelihood, or that's her son's livelihood. But they were willing to share. You see, so No doubt we are talking about urban poverty, but I would like to share with you all some aspects of the rural poverty, which is here with us. And these are the people that are going to be moved into the urban areas as Malaysia urbanized. By the year 2030, I think more than 80% of the population will be urbanized. And these are the people going to move in here. Are they ready for this urbanization process? Are they ready? So this is where our leadership and governance has to go beyond and to look into this issue, as YB have said very succinctly, about sustainability, and look into the industries and the banking sector. How is your money spent? And perhaps for the United Nations and these your NGOs to look into beyond the cities into these areas also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. I mean, I think it's quite true. I think this idea about working together has started for a long time. Maybe Dr. Neil, you want to respond, just to see what can we do differently, maybe learning from the past, your observations from other places.
Okay,
your countries.
thank you very much. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to respond. So I have to do one thing. I have to tell myself I am not Malaysian. Otherwise, I get too embroiled in the local situation. So I think firstly, Prof, thank you very much for those insightful questions. Just to let you know that UN Habitat is the United Nations Human Settlements Program. So we not only focus on cities, but the entire continuum of human settlements, from the smallest villages all the way to the biggest cities. So that is the approach that we have taken. Now, with regards to Agenda 21 and other more urban-based programs, of course, we have evolved that into new urban agenda, and of course, eventually the SDG 11 and the urban SDGs. Now, with regards to poverty and the issues that you have just raised, I think one key idea here that we need to think differently is one, definitely, as YB has mentioned, communications. Because I think in order for us to make sure that as the SDGs themselves permeate out from this room and this air-conditioned halls, people in suits and ties. Actually, I don't like to wear them, but apparently this is the de rigueur now. Sorry. In order for this to become buah mulut, I think we really need to look at a new generation of leaders. And as our executive director said yesterday, this means that it is not just leaders in the traditional sense of the YBs or whatever, but all of us, those of us who are informed, who I think Puan Khairia there in the hall is one very good example. She's a tireless advocate for these ideas, and then bring it down to the community level. Secondly, I would also like to maybe implore the representative from the banking industry, Tuan, because I think the key here is maybe a new way of thinking, moving away from shareholder to stakeholder. And I think a lot of banks are already moving in that direction. They see themselves as more than just doing corporate social responsibility, but being part and parcel of the community that they serve. And I'm not going to mention any bank, but I think with regards to your particular establishment, the Islamic values are also core to the way you invest, to the way you provide support for these communities. And that I think is linked to your question of how money is spent. And I think for us as well, just to let you know that the UN is also not perfect. The UN Habitat is very strange UN entity. We are a secretariat entity. We belong to under the Secretary General, but at the same time we can do operations. So we have 90 officers worldwide. We have a portfolio size of about 250 million USD per year, where we actually deliver support directly to communities. So YB for me is kind of like a bidang terjun, because after I left here, immediately I had to go in there for the last 18 months and to see some of our work delivered together with communities, even in places like Kabul. In Kabul, for example, we work very closely with communities to deliver 74 public parks. we have registered 1 million families so that they are able to actually have land titles, and from land titles you can then generate collection revenue for municipalities. And in that 1 million, Prof, we also registered women for the first time. When President Ghani was giving out the title deeds, it's very interesting because some men went up there with 3 wives or 2 wives or 1 wife, but most importantly is all the wives have now a part of the ownership of the title. And I think that these are some of the things which UN agency can do that translates what YB says, policy into practice. So I'm not sure whether I answered all the questions, but what I'm trying to do is to link up what the leadership governance and the implementing of the SDGs. I think implementing of the SDGs is actually a tool for places like Malaysia to actually move forward. We have done quite well. I mean, relatively, if you look at other countries, from 40% abject poverty to yesterday, Prime Minister said 5%. I mean, we can do much better. But the reality is that now the problem is more complex, and we need a systemic change. Thank you very much. So I said we, sorry.
Thank you.
I told you this will be happen.
Yes,
Thanks.
yes, you're right. You can't do it alone. Like I said, it was not an option anymore. Need to work together. So maybe YB, you wanted to respond to the LA21?
Yeah, so LA21 is still alive and kicking. In fact, I'm engaging to work on some local community farms, urban farms in my constituency. But the problem that these initiatives face is hyper-local politics. So this is politik kampung, politik, in the community. This person hates that person, sabotage this, sabotage that, biasalah. But we take a line that this is for the good of more than just the individuals who are participating. So we have to provide that kind of leadership. But I think people sometimes forget that the work that LA21 is doing, because it is a conglomeration of a number of entities, but at the heart of it, it is trying to, and still trying to do that. I think the problem with a lot of agencies that LA21 works with, or they draw their participants or the core from, is that when the director changes, bila pengarah tukar, everything changes. So this is the problem that I speak of when I said about sustainability. It is not a culture in that entity or organization. How is it that we can work to have it permeating that structure, so that it is in the wall, it is in the air, it is what you breathe, sustainability, right? It becomes second nature. It's difficult. For example, I think Puan Khairiah is no longer ahli lembaga penasihat di BKL. The work that she was doing was fantastic. So now you have lembaga penasihat who may not be following, but then how is it that we make sure that whoever still does, it's about making sure that whoever sits there can still do that kind of work. Yeah? But that is a difficult challenge. There was one thing that I wanted to highlight. Yes, this tax and transfer regime. Poverty is the principal moral question of our time now, right now. Yes, you can say 400,000 households, 440,000 households are considered abject poor after our chief statistician said that the pendapatan garis kemiskinan or poverty line income is 2,208 ringgit per household. But the reality on the ground is far different from what you see. And that's why I have always been an advocate that there should not be a figure which is pukul rata, but rather, or this kind of broad national average, but really almost state by state or district by district. Different parts of the country, Kuala Lumpur and Kuala Kangsar and Kuala Terengganu and Kota Kinabalu are very, very different. Not to mention Kubang Krian or that kind of, you'd be surprised, that kind of house exists in Lembah Pantai, 5 minutes away from here. So it is a symptom of a breakdown in the kind of reducing that kind of social equity gap, and ultimately it's about social mobility, ultimately. we talk about urbanization, but really what we're talking about is social mobility, right? And therein is the structural problem, which is access. It's about access. You can go to public school, you can go to SMK, but if your father is some Dato Sri, Tan Sri, whatever, you have a different path, right? Compared to, or if you go to MCKK or you go to RMC, you know, it's a different path, right? So it's about access. So how is it we can democratize that access so that we can have greater social mobility? And to make poverty eradication sustainable, it is about social mobility rather than purely handouts and stuff like that. And in terms of how government is functioning, actually the most progressive in my accounting, in my assessment of government agencies or entities that deal with poverty actually is Baitul Mal, because the metrics, the way that it approaches poverty is very multifactorial and multidimensional. Jabatan Kebajikan is singular. It is previously, if your household income is 980 ringgit and below, then you are. If you are with Implementation Coordination Unit, ICU of PMO, if your household income is below that, that's it. But with Baitul Mal, it is very very progressive, very inclusive, and it looks at the bigger picture. So I have been trying to convince other agencies to follow in the footsteps, at least in thinking about poverty as a multidimensional phenomena, and addressing it is not purely through handouts, but it's about addressing question of access and social mobility. So that would be more sustainable.
Thank you. Maybe Dr. Nizam, you want to just add on the concept of Baitul Mal and banks?
Okay, may I just share about the banking sector? Because I think any industry are facing with intense competition, and not to mention because of the technology changes. So that actually forces us to rethink how we should do our business. In our case, I've been telling to our management that the bank Islam need to be a partner with our customer. You know, we need to be a financial consultant to our customers and giving advice, not just product pushing and asking them to go on board with our products. No, that's not the way. So I think in that sense, that is how our efforts to try to educate the public about the financial literacy. For instance, like buying a house. To me, buying a house cannot be like macam tiba-tiba bangun pagi, nak beli rumah lah. Cannot be like that. It requires proper planning, and it requires need for you to save, and for you to invest. You know, so that you can accumulate a reasonable sum of money, so that you can buy a house at a time when your income you can afford it lah. So that's how we giving advice to our customer, and to ensure that hopefully our societies, urbanites become more, in terms of financially become more literate, and hopefully in terms of their balance sheets, their P&L, I mean at personal level become more sustainable. So that's how how we see things in terms of the industry landscape. Another issues that I want to or rather my observation I think YB mentioned pasal farming, right? Something to do with agriculture. So when I look at agriculture sector, I think this is almost forgotten sectors the way I see it, because when I look at the numbers like self-sufficiency ratio for say chili, 30% je. Halia, ginger, 16%. Rice, 7%. During Tun Razak's time, it was 86% in the 70s. Apa lagi? Ada banyak lagi yang actually below 100%. So what it means is that we are too reliant on imports in terms of food, and as a result, we continue to record trade deficits in agro-food. Last year, 17.4 billion in terms of our trade deficit in agro-food. In the 90s, the deficit was around 1 billion. That means the punya deficits in agro-food, the trade deficits continue to widen. That means we import more food. It's mind-boggling because I like to think that our country is very fertile. We have vast land, and we boleh cakap pasal agriculture je is always plant palm oil. It's too cliche lah. I think that needs to change. That's really need to change. So kalau the issue is tak cukup labor ke, then we address it. Kalau tak cukup baja, fertilizers ke apa ke, that you need to address that. But at personal level pula, because I also really into this agriculture, when I go for training kan, recently lah, I think last month in Pontian, I went for training for fertigasi chili in Pontian. I was surprised that a lot of young people were really interested in this fertigasi chili, because the technique is very productive, very high yield and very efficient, and not to mention this is a lucrative business lah, because chili tak cukup. And the first year punya cost mahal lah, because you need to build up the infrastructure, but the second year too, you can see your cost delivery down, then your margins can really bump up. So I see a lot of young people are really started going to agriculture. That's anecdotal evidence lah. But what if kalau there's a concerted effort by the government try to facilitate this transition, so that our urban punya population tu taklah terlampau congested sangat. You know, at least there's a balanced growth between the rural and also the urban, because of agriculture, and that could actually try to balance out in terms of the punya apa tu, the intensity ke, the too crowded ke in urban city. So that's my take.
Thank you, Dr. Nizam. I think we know about it, but I think it makes sense. It makes common sense when you talk about urban farming and urbanization. But I think to actually see this being followed through, it has to start probably from the policy makers and also the private sector when we talk about master planning, developing and things like that. So we're at 12 o'clock now, so I would like to open the floor for questions to our esteemed guests, or even do we have questions online? Okay, there's one. One. Just maybe state your name and organization. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Khairia Talha. I used to be the advisory board member of DBKL. I'm now representing Malaysian Institute of Planners. A question to YB. There are local leadership in the form of, we've got the Residents Association, we've got the RTs, Rukun Tetangga, and we also have the Majlis Perwakilan Penduduk. All are from, under the jurisdiction of different ministries. Some of them, the members actually do get allowances. Is there a move to consolidate this? And in your opinion, which one would be the most effective at the very local level? Yeah, because I think there needs to be consolidation, because from my own experience, really I do not know which organization to approach to when it comes to, as you know, when it comes to really local projects for them, yeah? And so that I would like to seek your opinion on that. Just to, again, substantiate what YB said about Local Agenda 21, it is still in practice, it's thriving. Cuma in the early days, and in the 80s, I was already working, like you, dark, old person, but hi. And so in the early days when LA 21 was implemented, it was a top-down approach. It was the government, the local government telling the people, here's what you got to do. So it did not really thrive, right, in that sense. But lately it has become more like bottom-up. The people, the officers will ask the local, communities, what is it that you want to do? And then the local authority become facilitators. So it's become, I think, a more effective mode of getting community participation and also local leadership. So that's my two observations. Just one more, just to add. During my experience of working with the communities, I did approach a bank to help us if they like it. I wouldn't mention the bank, but the thing is this: the banks are willing to assist in actually developing sustainable local leadership. They want to offer training, long-term training to groups of people, the poor, the single mothers, there are those programs, but the local community do not know about it. This is not publicized, so there's a gap, this communication gap. I just wish that more banks would be, more, I would say, will publicize what they can do to help the community. It takes intermediaries like us, to approach the bank, who we know, do you have this program, are you willing to help, then will they come forth. But I think there need to be a link somewhere. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. you want to respond first? Yeah. We just get back to you.
Just quickly, there are a lot of different organizations. One which very rarely gets mentioned actually is joint management bodies or management corporations. In fact, a lot of people have been fighting for the third vote, electing our mayors, but then we neglect to elect our own joint management body or management corporation, particularly in urban areas. Just to give you a sense, in 2018, 95% of people living in condominiums and strata properties in Kuala Lumpur, 95% of some over 5,000 strata properties, condominiums and such, did not hold an AGM. 97% neglected to send audited accounts. Maksudnya, yes, we want to elect our mayor, tapi we should be electing people who look after our condominiums juga lah. Those who are staying there, they don't know that. Persatuan Penduduk is under ROS and DBKL. Rukun Tetangga is under Jabatan Perpaduan. And then you've got sometimes other MPP is under Kementerian Wilayah, so they have different political masters, so to speak, different people who provide the funds for them to do activities, oftentimes for slightly different reasons. So of course, Persatuan Penduduk under DBKL, they get every year a certain amount of funds for them to hold events and activities in the community. MPP is supposed to represent whether it's the member of parliament or government at the local level. If you ask me, the most effective actually still can be Persatuan Penduduk, but just like JMBs and MCs, many there is a question of enfranchisement. You may need to do a little bit of background search. There are some Persatuan Penduduk in Bangsa, for example, that have had the same number of ahli since 1970s. So even though the population has grown, but it's still 40, 50 ahli, that's it. And you've got some that have 200, 300 members, and that's more reasonable. So you need to kind of look at it that way. To me, the best form of engagement is one which is inclusive. It is not prejudicial. It is not, you do not have a bias for or against one or the other. In fact, one of the most important forms of engagement, when I mention hyperlocal politics, it's really it's a derogatory connotation, but fundamentally it's about trust. Sometimes people don't trust each other because at the very local level, if you're looking at B40 communities, oftentimes it's about dispersion and dispersal of largesse. Bantuan bulanan, bantuan masa Aidilfitri, masa Deepavali. So dia kata kroni dia je saja yang dapat, kan? And there's a question there, you know, which you can't really run away from. So when you change the pemimpin tempatan tu, then the host of penerima might also be different. So I'm an advocate for a more far-reaching system of. So there has to be some reforms to this as well, lah. But oftentimes, you have banks coming in to support, you have corporate bodies coming in to support, and as a member of parliament, I don't block. You know, I'm not a gatekeeper, so there has to be some question. We saw this actually. One of the best things that happened during MCO, the first lockdown. Hopefully, we have no second lockdown. So those of you who have been in Sabah, please make sure you have your mask on. I didn't go, so I'm okay. But during the first MCO, we saw that there was a question of data among recipients. So at least there, apart from having the question of earth overshoot, there was a question of orang kata apa, support overshoot. Yeah? There's some correction there. So we started to see, oh, this family dah dapat 2-3 kali. Then you go for other families, and I think ultimately it comes down to data. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Puan Karya, for that observation questions.
Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum. My name is Sri Husnaini Sofjan. I'm not affiliated with any local organization, but I am a member of an advisory group to UN Habitat on gender issues. Just an observation and also a suggestion, I think.
I think when we talk about leadership and governance, we have not really, or we touch on the surface about the intersectionality of leadership and governance. Because in each community, in each locality, the intersectionality of the women, of the youth, of the different section, and also of the Persatuan Penjaja and all that. And YB is very right about mentioning that only when all these people understand what is sustainability, what are the policy of the government and all that, that we can actually move forward. And Neil mentioned about the 4Ps, private, public, people partnership, yeah? And that partnership selalunya cuma cakap collaboration. Collaboration is very ad hoc, it's very loose. I think when you look at people, or we actually aim at partnering with the people, you know, that's when the transformative policy and transformative development can happen. So for me, at this move, I think the commendable thing that I saw is that the organizer has created a space for grassroots. It's called Grassroots Assembly. But of course, it was the first one that we have not really built, tak bawa lagi betul-betul the suara grassroots, but through the facilitating NGO. And I think in the future, 1 year from now, I think there will be a grassroots voice sitting with you, you know, speaking, macam dekat tingkat antarabangsa, we have, you know, representative of grassroots themselves, you know, they are the leaders who are working and they are living in that disadvantage or the poor urban area or the slum area, and they are the partner of development for that area. So I think just that empowerment and the investment, the process of building trust and empowering the urban poor, I mean working with the urban poor takes a long time. Itu yang banyak kurang sabar, itu yang banyak kurang rasa tak nampak the impact, you know, because it's a process, the process oriented pembangunan yang melalui proses tu, proses panjang, dan selalunya bila you change people's mindset, it's not something, oh saya dah bina 10 toilet or so saya dah bina ni, tapi changing people mindset takes time, and I think that's part of the governance part that we actually need to invest in if we want to actually, you know, achieve the SDG, not just the numbers that we saw, without actually tanya makcik di tu apa perubahannya, yeah? Because I think the UN Habitat is going to launch what they call the new urban agenda platform. It's reporting, and that's not just numbers. They're going to also get the qualitative, yeah, not just quantitative. And I think that is something that Malaysia would aim to also contribute, the qualitative, the story, the case studies and all that. Just an observation, and I commend Urbanice and KPKT in actually holding this urban forum and bringing it actually to partnering it with parliamentarian and assembly person that you know, open to this and bringing the voices. I think bringing it down and then bringing it up again. Yeah. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you for that observation. I think even from this morning's session, there was a question about it, you know, bringing the grassroots, and I was truly moved by what Dignity for Children had done and how they are actually part of the community and bring transformation. And I believe that's where, when we talk about public-private people partnership, you know, we need to actually work more closely with NGOs and social enterprises who can actually move quicker than some of the bureaucracies that have been entrenched in the, you know, the way we work. I believe. I think that's just my personal observation. So thank you for that. Maybe we have a question online.
Thank you, Marina. Actually, we don't have any specific question from online, but we just get a very positive feedback from the audience, online audience, very precise thought and explanation from YB Fahmi and Prof. Pang, and also speakers. And then also YB Fahmi nailed the point, sustainable leadership requires effective top-down communication. And we also have a participant from Central American, from Honduras. It is incredible session and forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe another question from the floor. Anyone else? Maybe I would like to invite Dr. Neil to just have a closing as the discussant. Thank you.
I thought we could go for lunch already.
You know,
Oh.
to follow an agenda.
There's no free lunch, yeah? Okay. Thank you all so much, Marina, for the chairpersonship of the discussion. It's been you've done very well with all the putting us on the hot seat. YB, always a pleasure to see you and be in the same discussion again. Prof and also our corporate representative. Okay, let me just try to do a quick summary by going back to the title. I think the organizers have looked at this very carefully. Leadership and governance in the implementation of the SDGs to achieve inclusive urbanization. I think the keywords here are inclusive urbanization. Yeah, the SDGs provide a kind of foil, a kind of medium for us to be able to identify how we are going to do policy making. And I think, Prof, you have, in your presentation laid that out very well, how each of the SDGs are related to a particular segment of society, a particular aspiration of a country. I think so that's really quite well curated. And I think that the real qualitative element here, which YB has expressed very carefully, is this. Of course, Datuk Uzir is not here anymore. I mean, it's very important to have evidence. It's very important to have data to guide our decision making. But I don't know why I got this job, because I actually come from I'm a historian and specializing in literature. So not at all like urban planner, etc. But what I've learned is that if you really want to communicate effectively, if you really want to get that message across, to menjadikan ataupun melestarikan sustainability, menjadi buah mulut, I think the most important thing is to look at human relations, and to take that social cultural dimension as a kind of approach. And YB, you will remember when we were doing upgrading of the back lanes, etc. The key here is not just telling people what to do, or even bringing professionals into the picture, but to co-create the briefs, in this case to upgrade a back lane with the community. And I think that was very important, because I remember when I was doing it in Penang. Penang, we have a lot of NGIs in Penang, non-governmental individuals. They are one individual, but their voice is very loud. I think Sri is a good example. I'm going to get it, yeah. No, correct. And I think in Penang, we had complexities, but we didn't have the kind of complexity that we face in downtown KL. And I think one thing that we did, I would like to think, did much better in downtown KL or even in Johor Bahru than Penang is the engagement of the community, and not just looking at like private property owners or the corporate, the banks, etc. in downtown, but actually even the transient community, the people who are actually homeless. And because I said to our colleagues, whether you like it or not, they are actually in that back lane more hours than us. So technically, in a way, they are the main inhabitants of the back lane. But so how do we? And then we shouldn't presume to know, because as YB said, poverty is multi-dimensional. You'll be amazed if you interviewed them. You can understand how it's so easy to actually fall into poverty. I think one most important thing is not taking it for granted that we will always be in our condition, maybe due to illness, you cannot imagine, and then suddenly you are there. And so what I'm trying to say here is that in order to bring to life these policies, you really need to engage with the community. And as Sri said, it's not just saying participation or engagement. It's really co-creating these policies together. And I think that the corporate sector has a great role to play. And thank you because I think Bank Islam is also showing the way forward in how corporate sector can be more engaged. And what we have asked as UN Habitat to our foundations, we have a platform for charitable foundations and philanthropists, and it was launched at MUF2020 in Abu Dhabi, is to actually ask them to say, if you have X amount of money that you are giving out to as a corporate social responsibility, if you could devote X percentage of that to SDG 11. And we will help you with the quantification, yeah, to look at how are you contributing to SDGs. And this is what we are linking it with our local governments, with the voluntary local reviews, of which Puan Noliza and Urbanice Malaysia is leading the way here in Malaysia. So in that way, we can all have a platform to collaborate together. So on that note, I hope I've earned my lunch. Thank you very much.
Sorry, there's one question.
Okay, so there's one question online.
online.
Yes, go ahead.
So would the famous Hakka type household registration system work like China or Vietnam in avoiding congestion in the city and encourage a fair distribution development / prosperity? Interested to hear the panel through that question. Is from Kana, for members of the floor. It's from Kana, the name of the person.
It's about congestion. Congestion, yeah. Yeah. So I think we're at an age where we're at a time where actually you can leverage on a number of existing systems to find the best means possible to go from point A to point B. Fundamentally, you have to ask the question whether you need to go from point A to point B. And I think right now, for a lot of people, because of COVID-19, people are confronting that question every day. Do I really need to go to a mall? Do I really need to balik kampung? Do I really need to go to Sabah? Right? For example, I had to ask that question, right? And therein you can address the first question, whether you need to make that trip. Is it really? Do you really need to go there? And given that we have technology like online platforms to purchase things, you don't necessarily need to. And at the same time, this is something which I've been toying with. I started a job center on the 16th of September, Malaysia Day. The idea is that if one of the key ways to sustainably deal with the question of poverty is to find work for people, meaningful work for people locally. If in certain countries you can talk about eat local, that means you buy your produce local, is it possible for us to push for work local? Yeah? So that means if you live in place A, is there a job for you within a 2-3 kilometer radius? How is it that you can access this, yeah, without necessarily depending on public transport or private transport? Having said that, if you do have to go, I think right now, whether it's Waze, whether it's Google Maps, or whether it's any of the other kind of technology, you can kind of see that in real time. And that's why I think in terms of urban planning, in terms of traffic management and traffic planning, I don't think we are leveraging enough in terms of how local government, local councils, the data points are there. The information is there, but they're not using that, adopting that, bringing that into the conversation for how they think about development. And for Kuala Lumpur specifically, because I'm involved in the question of the KL structure plan as well as the KL city plan 2040, one of the proposals I made to Datuk Banda is, when you look at the KL city plan today, they have divided Kuala Lumpur into many little quadrants. And I posed this question, whether it was possible before you gave the development order to any developer who wants to build in a particular square kilometer or however, that you look at what else is being built there. Right now, DBKL doesn't look at it that way, right? I saw Nick Mastura was here, but she's on leave already technically. She's going to retire. And having that kind of conversation with local government is very important, because it is a contributing factor in the long run to the question of congestion. We have transit-oriented development as a policy, but it is not far-reaching enough because you can't just rely on DBKL to mitigate. You've got to have some kind of consumer behavior augmentation or rethinking, yeah, of why is it that we need to go from point A to point B. So it is a question for private individuals, it is a question for organizations, whether you need your workers to be at work. It is a question of city planners, town planners, architects, whether you need to have 9 stories of parking, or whether in an urban area, particularly downtown, you need to think about micro-housing without cars. Is that possible? Is that imaginable? Is that sustainable? So perhaps as we depart for lunch, I'll leave you with those questions. Thank you.
Actually, one sentence from the question, maybe Dr. Asfanizam and Dr. Pang can answer this. How to encourage a fair distribution, development, or prosperity to the nation?
Could I pass it to you first? That's a question I've always been asking all the time when I'm together with my students. All right, how can there be a fair distribution? That's why I was mentioning just now. How do you balance, looking at the new normal today, how do you balance between the rich and the poor? How do you balance between rural and urban? So these are the questions I don't have the answer, neither do my students, but I just make my students aware of it. I think that is very important, the awareness that you are living in a world that you cannot just avoid urbanization process, you cannot avoid industrialization process, you cannot avoid growth in productivity that depends upon more industrialization and urbanization, urban growth, you see. So we need to be aware of it. So the awareness part will contribute to more participation with hopefully sustainability in mind when they come out with their projects and their programs. My students always are being sent out to work with not only with the industries, but also to the rural areas, especially all the kampongs. I mean, you talk about congestion and so on in Kuala Lumpur, there's no congestion for us. There's no congestion at all, but we have congestion in the sense of trying to, tap into the website, for example. We don't have enough data, we don't even have enough electricity. We can't even go onto the handphone. Sometimes it takes a long time, you can see the thing going round and round and round. Sampai bila ni? I said, you tanya saya ke? Tak tahu, you see? So this is the congestion that we face. We don't face traffic congestions. We go anywhere, anytime. We can tell you exactly what time we will reach your place. But in Kuala Lumpur, it's impossible, right? You say 10 o'clock, you may have to start at 6 a.m. You know, okay? So I pass it to you.
Thank you. I think talking about congestion, there was also this, I think there was a study where they talk about how fresh grads, they seem to earn a lot, but they realize that they spend half their first salary on getting to work. So on their cars, on their petrol, and their loans. So I think that was also some areas that Khazanah Research is also looking into in terms of cost of living. What does it actually mean in terms of cost of living, and I think. And with that, thank you very much to all the panelists. I think I truly enjoyed the dialogue that we had this morning, almost to lunchtime. Initially, I was a bit like unsure now. Can we actually talk for 2 hours? It's quite a long movie for 2 hours. But I think it went by quite fast. And again, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us, and well done on this. All the best for the next few sessions that are coming. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melissa, and to all the panelists today. Let's take a photo, a group photo on stage, please. Yeah, and